Hello, and welcome to the Long Ways podcast. We are a hiking trio, actually, today, out to hike the long trails of Europe and beyond. I'm Devin Windelspect.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Windelspect.
And Eric Weber's here too.
Perfect. That's actually what we wanted to introduce today. We finally have our third, Eric Weber, here for the full episode on hiking the Julian Alps in Slovenia. Eric was previously on for a short ways episode with Mike. But Eric, can you just introduce yourself before we jump into the episode today?
Hey everyone, Eric Weber here. I am basically the photojournalist for the group. I'm not sure why they picked me to tag along, but I generally let my pictures speak the words, and you all do the writing that speaks the other words. So we make a good duo, and fortunately, I like to hike.
Yeah, Eric joined us on our second long ways trip in the Highlands of Scotland. And he's been doing these with us ever since. So this was our last trail was what, your fourth with us, Eric?
This would be fourth. Yep.
Yep. So he is one of our tried and true of the trio of us hiking together. Dad, we recently hiked the Julian Alps of Slovenia.
Did we really hike the Julian Alps?
Well,
I think the Julian Alps hiked us.
Exactly. We'll just put it out here first and say we put out a Substack recently that kind of went over the trail. This was head and shoulders the hardest hike we have done yet. Period. We tackled a trail that was a little bit more like mountaineering and a little bit less like the hikes that we normally do. And it was tough. It was a really, really, really tough trail. And the episode we wanted to do today, we wanted to look at the things you need to know to go onto the trail, but we also want to talk about, we're experienced hikers now. Dad and I have done 5 of these, Eric's done 4. We still can bite off more than we can chew. Let's put it that way. And we wanted to talk a little bit about a retroflective of this trail and what we learned from it and what we would do differently and how it's kind of informed our hiking going forward. But I'm going to start with Dad, actually. Can you tell us a little bit about why we chose Slovenia? Because it wasn't our initial trail to pick.
No, it wasn't. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know that we were all excited about hiking the Dolomites. And unfortunately, as we mentioned before, so were about 3,000 other people. And so we got bumped to just a little bit over to the east, into Slovenia, which I kept confusing with Slovakia, which made a very confusing travel arrangements at one point, because there seems to be another couple countries in the way.
Yeah, quite a few.
Quite a few. Yeah, exactly. But so basically, Max Adventures, a big shout out to them again, for being setting us up with these so many times. Basically moved us over to what was considered to be a similar trail in Slovenia, a relatively new trail, I think, to the Max Adventures group. I'm guessing from everything we went through, which was leading from Bled, Slovenia. So that's how we ended up there. Same time frame though, but yeah. So, but it was not exactly the same expectations or outcome.
Yeah, exactly. I think to start with, let's say the good things about Slovenia. And the first one is that Slovenia is probably, every time we come back from one of these trips, we say it's one of the prettiest places we've ever seen. I don't know. I think Slovenia might take the cake. Eric, you're the photographer here. Do you want to talk a little bit about just what Slovenia is like?
Yeah, I would agree. The vistas along this trail were nothing more than tremendous. It was, as a photographer, there are so many layers and textures and colors that it was actually challenging in some places to be able to try to get it all in a photo, because you want to try to capture as much as you can. And, you can imagine, the wide angle lenses trying to capture as much, but it still doesn't do it justice. And to combine that with the fresh air and just the smells that you get in a new place, in a new location. It just tickles all your senses, and it was absolutely a stunning hike.
Yeah, I mean, I remember even the first day we did a little warm up hike before we actually hit the main trails, where we went to the Vintgard Gorge. Is just like this really cool, like crystal clear mountain river, kind of going through this beautiful gorge in the mountains. And between that and Lake Bled itself, which is just this alpine lake with like this little island in the middle with a little church on it. Um, I would say that Slovenia is just hands down just gorgeous. Um, People there were obviously lovely. I have nothing but good things to say for the country of Slovenia, period.
Wait a second. I got to mention one thing about Slovenia, which we keep forgetting about. Okay. And that is the mixed meat plate. Okay. I got to tell you. Okay. Okay. There is nothing like going for a hike. And when they say mixed meat, there is no vegetables. It is about 2 pounds of grilled meat. Okay. So I'm sorry if you're a vegetarian right now. Okay. But this is pretty good stuff coming off the trail. And the beer was very, very good too. So let's should we make a plug for the Slovenians on that one? So
Well, like I was about to say, the trail itself though was another story. So we did this thing called the high routes of the Julian Alps. And the way this works is that it was 5 or 6 days of hiking, like really like the tops of the mountains. Normally with these, we go up into the mountains, then we come down to the valleys and we stay at like a little bed and breakfast. And we kind of do that each day. And this time we decided to do something different. We decided to stay in mountain huts along the way, and to be kind of staying like above pretty much the tree line for a lot of the hike. I haven't done something like that since I was 18, hiking in Colorado, and it was different for sure. So we did about 5 or 6 days on the trail there, hiking through the tops of the mountains. Again, absolutely gorgeous, but also really exposed, really rugged hiking. And hiking where, we're normally used to having a bed and breakfast at the end or a small hotel, and having to also deal with the realities of hut to hut hiking. So all these things kind of combined made this one of our more challenging trips. We recently actually wrote a Substack about 6 things you need to know to hike the Julian Alps. And I actually want to go through some of those points with you guys, because I feel like these were the things that caught us by surprise, and that I think we should talk through how it was for us to go through it. So I'm going to start with this one point here, which is something that I think really encapsulates the trail, which is understand what challenging really means. When we saw it on Max Adventures, I think they have like these challenge ratings, and I think this was like 1 star above what we usually do. And we're like, okay, we're experienced hikers. What's 1 star? 1 star is a whole lot. So Dad and Eric, do you want to go through like what made this a particularly challenging hike?
well, I'm going to go ahead and start with the fact that we started off with a beautiful first day, okay, in the Vintner Gorge, which is an absolutely, outside of Bled, absolutely gorgeous. If you do nothing else in Slovenia, go there. This was just a day hike, and then I think we realized we may have known that challenging meant something very different when they kept telling us the first day of the actual hike was the easy day, and come to find out that even that first segment was very, very strenuous. Okay. Completely strenuous. So, I knew that, this was going to be a little challenging when, the next morning, I was outside and they were using Army helicopters to rep supplies up to the huts, and you couldn't see the helicopters as they disappeared into the clouds and disappeared in the side of the mountain. So just to give you that we haven't seen that type of vertical gains not even in Mount Blanc, which had a lot of gains, but the trail was, a little bit more maintained. So this was very vertical. What do you think, Eric?
I think it goes back to, topics that we've talked about before. You can't prepare enough for certain situations, right? These verticals were straight up, and it was all day up or all day down. And you, even though you can prepare for hills, you can't necessarily prepare for terrain. And this particular trail, the loose rock was something that your muscles can't prepare for, and it is really hard to feel confident when your feet are moving when you don't want them to, for example. And I think I also prepared for cold weather, so I had mentally prepared for cold weather and rain, and it was hot. It was a heat wave. So you think of physical struggles as one part of the puzzle, but the mental struggles that also come along with your feet not being confident, you didn't pack for the right climate. It's mentally taxing as well. So you can combine those two things, and it becomes a different sort of challenge.
And I think the packing thing is a really important part of this too, because we always pack for almost anything, okay, no matter where we're going. But if you're heading to a certain destination and you read through the books, like for example, we're going to Ireland, it's supposed to rain every day, okay, and yes, we did get lots of rain one day, but also a heat wave another day. And everybody kept saying, be prepared for cold, inclement weather at the highest peaks and stuff. And even when we were hiking at the lower levels, it was already hot. And this means that water becomes, as we'll see, another issue, and hydration and stuff. And so, yeah, we were kind of prepared, but I was also prepared for cold weather. I had insulated, rain gear, on me. I mean, I was thinking I don't want to be at the top of a mountain and being cold and wet. Well, that didn't happen. In so many ways, it didn't happen. So,
well, I think the other thing, kind of going back off Eric's point, that the loose rock for me was a huge thing. But there's 3 moments that I remember particularly challenging. The one, Eric, if you remember this, is when we were hiking hut to hut and we started to see the mountains above us. And this was on like the second day, I think. And we saw this tiny little dot on the mountain. And Eric turned to me and he's like, "Is that a hut?" I'm like, "No, I think it's like a storm shelter or something." And then we got to our halfway point and we looked up and we realized, oh my God, that's actually the hut we're hiking to. And it was literally on Mount Triglav, the tallest mountain in Slovenia, maybe like half a finger's length down from the peak. And kind of like realizing, oh, we got ourselves into the situation where we're actually hiking the majority of the tallest mountain in Slovenia to get to our next hut. That was something. And the other one is, it's actually a more technical hike than we're used to. Eric, do you want to talk about the ropes and pulleys and ladders?
Yeah, this is one of the things I was most nervous about, as someone who doesn't really like heights at all. We knew that there was some articulation in the hike. It seemed like it was going to be, very minimal. That's not exactly how it was at all. We thought maybe 1 or 2 of these crossings, but there was at least a dozen, and it seemed like they got more technical as the higher we got. And that, obviously, as someone who with a fear of heights, was not very comforting. But and I wouldn't say it's necessarily scary stuff. It's just you're using cables and spikes to climb rocks that you don't want to necessarily look down on either, right? You just want to keep moving forward, and again, add into that mental struggle that you weren't prepared for. It's just a lot. And the higher you get up in the mountains, obviously, the elevation changes and the less air, it's just more and more and more compact. That day that you mentioned of hiking that mountain, that seemed an impossible distance away at the halfway point. It didn't seem like that was even approachable. So, you add all these things, you compound all these things, and you can't prepare for that. Those are one of the things that make these hikes so rewarding, is you fight through that. You're persistent, and by the time you get to that top, that's part of that reward. It's I did this. I can't believe I did this. I didn't think I could do that. And then we reward ourselves with a nice cold beer, which they actually had at the top of the hill.
Yeah, they did. We had a lot of, well, at the top of Mount Triglav, it was more lukewarm beer, but it was still worth it.
It was still a reward.
I also remember when we were hiking to the top of Mount Triglav, Eric and I we were like cheering each other on, like, dude, you're almost there, like working on adrenaline. We get to the top, it's a false summit. There's another entire summit left to go. And I just remember my entire heart sinking into my chest right then. Those things happen, but I think this was also maybe the hike where we felt elevation the most. Once you got above like 8,000 feet or so, you can start to really feel it up there. And we were hiking some of these passes, we were hiking 7,000 to 8,000 feet easy.
Yeah, when you're talking about that particular point, that false peak, that's right when we got to that point of elevation. And I remember you could see the top of the hut, and we had maybe a quarter mile to go, but it was straight up. And I remember being so tired that it was taking like 10 steps to go one step. Because the gravel was so loose, we were going straight up, and I was so tired. It was like little tiny baby steps just to keep from falling backwards, basically.
Which I think gets us to our second point, which is at the top, our first hut, kind of understanding what hut to hut hiking is. So before this, we've only stayed in, bed and breakfasts, hotels. That's our preferred way. And I think after this is especially our preferred way of hiking. But hut to hut hiking is interesting because it really is like staying in hostels. You like staying in small cramped rooms, but picture a hostel where no one showered because no one can shower. Really hearty food. So we're talking like sausages. What else did they have there? They had like a lot of like barley based things, I remember. Goulash, lots of goulash. And the other thing is, at the end of the day, not a whole lot to do once you're done hiking. I brought a book, but you have a lot of these places don't have like that many power outlets or anything like that. So like if you run out of batteries on your phone and it's dark out up top, it's not like you're reading a book for a long time. So the hut to hut hiking was interesting. And I feel like that was another little mental strain. Like for me, I felt that it was something I could do once during a hike, like get up to the top of a mountain, Mount Triglav, spend the night in a hut and then come back down. But after like the third day of being in a hut, I was pretty done. I don't know about you, Eric.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember when you're on a hike like this and you're hut to hut, these people are professionals, right?
Yeah.
It's quiet hours after 8. Most of these people, especially the folks that were climbing to the top of Triglav, were up before sunrise to get up there for that sunrise. Like these people, this is business to them, right? So it's not you're not picturing people sitting around, getting rowdy after hours. We're going to eat and we go to sleep. And if you're offended by people, mass amounts of people stacked in a room, it's not for you. If you're willing to cooperate and just understand that these people are there for the same reason as you, they just want to get a good night's sleep and get something to eat and move on, then it's not so bad. But I agree with you, after 3 days it was I had enough of it. The just having personal space for a bit is also part of that mental game, right? You just talk about 3 or 4 days with not great sleep, having to shower in a sink basically, and wait in line to do that, and everything else that goes along with that. It's a lot. But the food was plentiful. We never struggled for nourishment, that's for sure. We were able to get enough fresh water everywhere, which was also good. And I think it's also important to note when you talk about that is some of these places don't have running water, so you can get water, but you, in many cases, have to pack your garbage out. So it's just another thing to consider when you're packing out a big bag or something, that you want to leave some extra space for things you might not consider.
Yeah. I remember I had actually some of the best tea of my life up there. Like they have really good honey in Slovenia. And like all the people who ran these things for the most part, they were really lovely. Maybe not the one woman who we believe has lived her entire life on the top of Mount Triglav, but it was a really cool experience. And I am glad we did it, but I agree that like there is something about having just a little bit of personal space at the end of the day, a little bit of time to unwind at the end of the day. That's just really useful on these longer hikes. Um, and that also might be that we're getting old. I'm sure if I was 18, again, I would not I would not care one bit whether we were staying in a dormitory. But I'm the old age of 27 now, and I want my luxury. So Dad, I actually want to switch to this point, which I think is a really good one to get to, which is kind of the build in regular rest, don't push yourself too hard, and kind of the know your limits part of this hike. We had a really hard time even on like the first day of like really working through like figuring out what our limits were. Do you want to talk towards that?
Yeah, I think that the first day, well, actually, it was actually the second day. I mean, the first day was really just the gorge, but which was very easy. I think what happened the second day is we kind of got caught with we were well rested coming into this. So what we did is that we built in a couple of days beforehand. Eric and I actually flew into Venice, okay, and then came up from there through trains and met up with Devin and Ljubljana, okay, and then headed up. So we were pretty well rested beforehand. It wasn't like we were just getting off a plane and trying. But that first day of hiking, we were really worried because it was because of the heat that was going on, the heat wave. There were some pretty brutal thunderstorms that were brewing right there in the Alps, and they were very unpredictable as they are in mountain ranges. It's not that you see them come rolling in, and we were trying to beat a afternoon thunderstorm, and so we really pushed ourselves on what really probably wasn't a difficult ascent to a series of huts the first day, okay, at the first stop, and then we had to make it to the ridge, and our goal was to get over the ridge. And in my case, I became very dehydrated very quickly. It was hot, and I wasn't ready for hot, like I said. And so I became dehydrated. I had the same problem Eric had. It just seemed like every step forward up this slag was like 4 steps up, slide down, and getting your legs to beat. And we didn't make it to the peak.
Yeah,
the thunderstorm hit. Okay, so we had to like scramble.
Oh, that's
back
my
down
thing.
again.
I do not like thunderstorms.
Yeah, Devin doesn't like thunderstorms. Eric doesn't like heights. I'm not liking mountains anymore, it appears. So so we had to go back down, hide into this cliff face. Some pretty funny pictures of us on our website of us sitting there underneath this thing, not looking very happy. And it was really, and then what happened was, because of the rain, on the way back down again, we were exhausted. Okay, because we basically had to backtrack and come back over it, and we still were pushing ourselves to get back down. And we hit a slag descent, okay, which is a rock scramble that lasted for a couple miles. The scenery was gorgeous, okay, but it was a very, very rough descent. And we all know that I have 2 artificial knees, okay, and they're great, but they don't like sliding around in rocks, So because we were exhausted and tired and a little anxious because of the storm and dehydrated, this became a very, very different hike than what we've done before, which was very comparable. I mean, we've done hikes like this before, but we weren't taking regular rest. We kept pushing and pushing. And I think in retrospect, that was a mistake. We should have stopped. We should have stopped no matter what was going on. We didn't make the peak anyways. We still got hit by the stupid thunderstorm. Okay. So, and the nice thing about the Slovenian thunderstorms, they're over very quickly. I mean, we must have waited 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe. Right. And then, so if we had built in more rest that day, I think the experience would have been much more enjoyable. But we didn't. We were pushing ourselves.
Yeah. Again, I'm not a huge fan of thunderstorms, especially at the tops of mountains. So I will take a little bit of the responsibility for trying to get us over the hill, because I was trying not to get caught in a thunderstorm.
I don't think any of us want to be caught in that thunderstorm.
No. We actually found like
I don't think you could love thunderstorms and not have enjoyed that one.
It actually came in. We found like a little. I found like a little overhang of rock, and like by a little overhang, I mean like 2 feet. And I was like, I'm going to sit here for the next 30 minutes, and we're going to wait for this one to come over.
And that lightning was pretty close the whole time, so it was a smart move.
It was not a fun experience on my end. If Eric's not had a hard time with going over the steep drops, I had a really hard time with that thunderstorm. But these things happen on a trail. But yeah, so I wanted to kind of switch a little bit towards, well, the first question I always like to ask actually with these is what was one highlight and one low light from the trail for you guys?
Um, I, so the highlight for me, I think, was the accomplishment itself. When I say the rewards at the top being, just accomplishing the hike, but I got up in the mornings when we were in the peaks of the mountains, and I was able to get sunrise photos, which again, the textures and the colors are can't be compared to anything else that I've been able to take before. So for me, though, I reap the rewards, getting up and snapping those photos that we'll have forever, right? Those are the things that I can contribute, that speak words to me. That was my reward. And I think the one thing that I would say is I don't have any disappointments, to be honest. I think that I'd say the one downfall for me was the difficult terrain in many cases. Even though we were hiking at these beautiful elevations and the vistas were stunning, I felt myself looking at my feet a lot to keep my balance. And unless you stopped, you didn't get to take advantage of some of those vistas. That was a hard thing for me, especially as a photographer. But I also want to stay upright, so I did spend a lot of time looking down just to make sure that I wasn't going to fall.
I actually can I can pinpoint the lowest point of the trail for Eric, where Eric we were coming over this plateau after this brutal descent, and it was hot and it was gorgeous, but we just had the sun beating down on us. And Eric just took off his pack and threw it to the side, and took his poles and threw it to the side and just sat down. I was like, "Yep, I know exactly where you are right now, man."
It's a good point. Again, we weren't prepared for the sun to beat down on us. Literally,
totally
was like baking in an oven. So if you think about the elevation up above 8,000 feet, there's not much vegetation. There's no reprieve from the sun up there. It is. Some of the pictures look like we're marching across Mars, and the sun was hot and it was beating on us. And at this point, I was done. We had drank almost all the water we had with us at that point, and we still had a couple miles to go.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good point that you made it, because you got me through the moment. You just relaxed. You sat down with me and we took a break. We didn't say much. We knew we had a rescue hut coming up.
Yeah.
It looked like it was close, but again, everything on the trail looks like it's closer. It seems. And we got there, we refreshed ourselves, and we got to the next place. But I think that's a good point. Just being supportive. You don't like the thunderstorms. I don't like heights.
Yep.
I was dehydrated and needed a break. Like, just remember you're part of a team when you're out there.
Exactly.
Hopefully you're with a team when you're out there. I think that was one of the, I wouldn't do that hike without a team, just because of those sort of things. And a couple times we had to look at the map, once or twice to make sure we were going the right way. So just another shout out to hiking with a group that is supportive.
Yeah. Dad, what was a highlight for you on the trail?
Well, my experience in this trail is very different than yours. Okay. In the fact that I didn't actually, after that first day, I came back down and met you back after the hut to hut portion. So that first day, the dehydration, the rock scrambling and things like that, I had to make a call on it. Okay. And I did not do the hut to hut portion. I regret that. Okay. Portions of it. I'd like to have seen it, but I think in retrospect, I'm a little older. Okay. And I wasn't quite as ready for it. And I'm in good shape for hiking, but I wasn't ready for mountaineering. So that was going to be my low point, is not making it to the top. The highlights, though, really were Vintner Gorge, and I got to spend 2 days hiking around Lake Bohinj, which was one of the most beautiful lakes I've ever seen in Slovenia. And I basically went out and did waterfall hikes and things. Absolutely gorgeous. The people of Slovenia were just fantastic. I was a little down from not continuing with the group, but those days of hiking that beautiful lake were great. And then when I saw you guys finally come down that last day, this is the moment I saw you, I realized, okay, I did the right thing on this one. So you looked like you had been beaten up as you came down that last day. And we still had to hike 3 miles back along the side of the lake, to get back to the hotel for the night. So I really think it's a beautiful country. I would definitely go do hike Slovenia again. I think the high passes may not be the way to do it for me. Probably even the lower passes were challenging, but beautiful country, absolutely fantastic people. Scenery the best scenery I think we've ever seen. Okay, we have seen some amazing stuff in Portugal and Ireland and Scotland and Mont Blanc. Slovenia far beat that. And even I was taking good pictures, which means that this is something, okay, because that's usually not possible. So that was it. That was it. I would really like to do it again and to do parts of those hikes again, or at least go back to Slovenia again.
Well, that kind of gets me to our last question, which is we have a new trail planned. Now, as we realized with the Dolomites, this is as set in stone as it can be, but it's subject to change if we want to announce that, or we can keep that to our chest for right now. But how did this trail help inform how we're going to do future trails on the long ways?
I think that what happened with this is it made us realize that why we're doing the trails. Okay. We are not necessarily adventure hikers. Okay. We're experienced hikers. Okay. And I think that we enjoy the experience of a hard hike during the day. Doing 14, 15 miles and along the coast or something. We want to be able to stop and enjoy ourselves. We enjoy having that time at night to kind of get together and reflect over a meal and in a shower, obviously. That's the experiences we're building. Other people may hike for different reasons. I know people who do the long distance hikes. I know people who run these trails. I remember we saw people running Mont Blanc when we were there, which is insane. But people hike for different reasons, but I would say that we are experienced hikers. And so I'll tell you that as we build the next one, and we'll throw out a little bit of a disclaimer. So it was actually Max Adventures just recently told us we are approved and we're all set. We will be going to Turkey. Okay.
Exactly.
So we'll provide more details on that. We're going back to our idea of site to site hiking. Okay. And then, having those experiences, being able to stop in the middle of it, and spend some time with the photography, asking questions, culture, all those types of things.
Yeah. Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
I would agree. I feel like I can prepare for any adventure, but every time I prepare for something, we're always dealt a different hand. So there's a preparation for where you're going, but there's also the sort of adrenaline rush you get from a new challenge. And what I think I've learned from this particular challenge is I can get through anything. I know this now.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's many challenges that I can't do. However, I do agree that I think we've gotten to the point where we know what we're really good at. And that is, sort of taking our time. We want to drink it in, right? Like I want to be able to, when we stop for a break, and we talked about this, you need to stop for breaks. I want to capture those moments. I don't want to carry 40 pounds of camera gear on my back and come back with, just a handful of pictures. I want to be able to revisit those moments, capture them, like I said earlier, in pictures. That's how I capture the story. And I want to be able to do that more frequently, instead of looking at my feet all the time to make sure I don't slide to my death.
Yeah. I think for me, well, two things. I didn't go over my highlight, and my highlight for the trail was I remember being at the top of Mount Triglav and seeing the sunset come in over the mountains and feeling like you're just on top of the entire world because there's nothing higher than you up there. And I remember that's where Eric got some of his best photos. And for me, that made the trip worth it. But it kind of dovetails into my what I learned from the trail, which is that we hiked a trail where two of the three of us could do it, but one of us was at our limit. And I think I realized on this trail specifically that we are a 3-person hiking team. And if all three of us aren't on the trail, there's something missing. And so I think for the future trails, what I really realized is that it's more about, let's make this is an adventure that all three of us can do. And all three of us can really enjoy and spend time on. And because it's not the same. If, I had a great time hiking with Eric, but there was always something missing. And I think that's the big part of this looking forward for me. Let's make sure that we can do a trail that is something that all three of us can do, because it's more about us hiking together than it is about, conquering some mountain or something like that. So I think that's what I took from the trail. Hopefully the Turkey trail is a little bit more like the Portugal one. It's more of a coastal hike that we're going to be doing. I've never been to Turkey. Dad has momentarily as part of the Navy, but this is really a new country for all of us also. And it's also, depending on your definitions, this is also our first trip outside of Europe for hiking. So that's also kind of an exciting thing coming up, that we're kind of branching outside of Europe and trying some other parts of the world. So yeah, that's all I have for today, guys. Do we have anything else?
Would love to mention that if you'd like to see some of the photos that taken along the trail, they're available on SmugBug. Would love for you to take a look, see some of the stories that I was able to capture with my camera.
They're great photos.
For sure. And we will also include a link to that in our episode description. So make sure that you click on that below. They're also really good for hanging around your apartment specifically. So perfect. Well, I think if that's all, thank you for listening to the Long Ways podcast. Once again, I'm Devin Windelsbeck.
I'm Mike Windelsbeck.
And I'm Eric Weber.
And thank you for listening. We look forward to having you listen to our next podcast soon.